On the night of the 8th of August, 1969, Hollywood's glittering dream turned into its darkest nightmare. In a secluded mansion on Cielo Drive, just above Beverly Hills, 5 people were brutally murdered. Among them was Sharon Tate, a rising star, adored not only for her beauty, but for the promise she carried both as a young actress and as an expectant mother, just 2 weeks away from giving birth. To the outside world, Sharon's life was everything a young woman in Hollywood could dream of. She was married to acclaimed director Roman Polanski. Her face graced magazine covers, and her career seemed ready to soar. Yet that night, all of it ended in blood and terror. The scene the police discovered was almost beyond comprehension. Messages scrawled in blood on the walls, lifeless bodies scattered across what had been a sanctuary of success and glamour. The murders were not random. They were the work of a cult led by a failed musician turned self-proclaimed prophet Charles Manson. His so-called family, young drifters, entranced by his apocalyptic vision, carried out one of the most infamous acts of violence in American history. Overnight, Hollywood lost its innocence. The Dream Factory was no longer untouchable. Its brightest lights could be extinguished in the most gruesome way imaginable. Sharon Tate's death became more than a tragedy. It was a symbol of a cultural shift, the end of an era of carefree optimism in 1962nd California. The golden promise of Hollywood now carried a shadow, one that would haunt its stars and audiences for decades to come. But the truth behind Sharon Tate's murder and the world that allowed Charles Manson to rise was far darker than anyone in Hollywood wanted to admit. Sharon Marie Tate was born on the 24th of January, 1943, in Dallas, Texas, into what seemed like an ordinary American family. Her father, Paul Tate, was a career officer in the U.S. Army, and her mother, Doris, was a homemaker, devoted to raising their 3 daughters. Because of her father's military career, Sharon's childhood was anything but stable. The family moved constantly: Texas, Louisiana, Washington, and even Italy, forcing Sharon to adapt again and again to new schools, new languages, and new friends. Despite this rootless upbringing, one constant became clear from the time she was a child. Sharon possessed an ethereal beauty that made people stop in their tracks. Blonde hair, delicate features, and a radiant smile earned her the admiration of neighbors and classmates wherever she went. By the age of 6, she had already won her first beauty contest. Yet behind that early recognition, Sharon remained painfully shy, almost uncertain of the attention she attracted. Life on the move meant Sharon often felt like an outsider. While other children built lifelong friendships, she learned to keep her distance, never quite settling in one place long enough to belong. This quiet loneliness shaped her in ways few could see. Those close to her described her as gentle, almost fragile, with a kindness that stood in sharp contrast to the cruelty of the industry she would one day enter. When her family was stationed in Verona, Italy, Sharon began to blossom socially. She attended American high school abroad, where her striking looks made her a local celebrity among American servicemen and Italian civilians alike. It was during these years that Sharon began appearing in small modeling assignments, gracing local magazines and advertisements. Though she had no formal acting training at the time, a spark had been lit. Her parents, however, were protective. They worried about Hollywood's reputation, about the dangers awaiting a beautiful young girl in an industry known for its exploitation. But Sharon, for all her quietness, harbored a determination of her own. Acting was not merely about fame for her, it was about belonging, about finally finding a place where her transient childhood and shy spirit could transform into something lasting. By the late 1952nd, as the Tate family returned to the United States, Sharon carried with her not only the experiences of a wandering youth, but also a growing ambition. She wanted to try. She wanted to step into the light. And Hollywood, always hungry for fresh faces, was waiting. The young woman who had once drifted from city to city was about to step into a world where millions would know her name. But with that recognition would come the first cracks in the fragile dream. When the Tate family returned from Italy in the early 1962nd, Sharon set her sights on Los Angeles. At just 18 years old, she was thrust into a city that promised stardom but offered little mercy. Hollywood in those years was a paradox. Dazzling on the surface, ruthless underneath. Every casting call drew hundreds of hopefuls, each young woman competing for the same fleeting glance from a producer or director. Sharon, despite her beauty, quickly discovered that charm alone was not enough. Her first encounters with Hollywood were marked by rejection. Studio executives dismissed her as too inexperienced, and some suggested she lacked the dramatic training needed to stand out. Sharon took on minor modeling jobs, posing for hair product ads, gracing the background of magazines, but the path to serious acting roles was closed off. In an industry built on stereotypes, she was often seen as just another pretty blonde, interchangeable and expendable. She began auditioning for television parts, but even there she faced disappointment. Though she landed small walk-on roles and extra in crowd scenes, a secretary with no lines, her ambitions seemed to outpace her opportunities. Friends later recalled how Sharon would leave auditions with a smile, determined to keep trying, only to cry quietly when she was alone. For every door that opened, 10 more seemed to slam shut. In 1963, Sharon's big break almost came when she was spotted by producer Martin Ranzerhoff, head of Filmways, who believed she had star potential. He signed her to a contract, but his strategy was to groom her, placing her in minor roles while keeping her out of the spotlight. Years passed with Sharon relegated to uncredited appearances, learning patience as others around her leapt forward in their careers. The waiting was excruciating. Financially, life was not glamorous. Sharon shared cramped apartments with other young actresses, working odd jobs between auditions. At one point, she considered giving up and returning to Europe, where she had felt more welcomed. But something inside her resisted. She was determined not to vanish quietly from Hollywood's crowded stage. Personal struggles compounded the difficulties. Sharon entered relationships that sometimes blurred the lines between mentorship and exploitation, a common trap for young women in Hollywood at the time. She endured whispers, gossip, and pressure from men in power who promised roles in exchange for favors. Though she resisted compromising her integrity, the very act of standing her ground often meant losing opportunities. By 1965, Sharon finally began securing speaking roles on television shows such as The Beverly Hillbillies and Mr. Ed. They were modest parts, but they allowed her to demonstrate charm, timing, and presence. Still, the leap from television novelty to film actress remained elusive. She was caught in a cycle of almost successes, close enough to taste fame, but never enough to grasp it. And yet, these years of struggle, rejections, and humiliation shaped Sharon's resilience. They forced her to refine not just her craft, but her character. She learned to be gracious in failure, to hide her doubts, to keep faith in herself when Hollywood showed none. Every no she endured only deepened the hunger for the yes that she knew would eventually come. What Sharon could not foresee was that her turning point was closer than she imagined, a meeting that would change not just her career, but the course of her life. Sharon's turning point came in the mid-1962nd, when perseverance finally met opportunity. After years of minor appearances and endless rejections, she was cast in her first significant film role, Eye of the Devil, 1966. Filmed in Europe, the gothic thriller paired her with established stars like David Niven and Deborah Kerr. Sharon's ethereal beauty and haunting screen presence drew notice. Critics remarked on her ability to convey fragility and mystery in equal measure. For Sharon, the film was proof that she could hold her own alongside the industry's most respected actors. The momentum carried forward. In 1967, Sharon starred in Valley of the Dolls, an adaptation of Jacqueline Susann's best-selling novel. The film was critically panned, but Sharon's performance stood out. She played Jennifer North, a character whose tragic arc and actress consumed by the pressures of fame eerily mirrored Sharon's own anxieties about Hollywood. The role earned her a Golden Globe nomination for Most Promising Newcomer. For the first time, the industry recognized her as more than just a pretty face. By now, Sharon's image was everywhere. She appeared on magazine covers, posed for high-fashion spreads, and became a fixture at Hollywood's most exclusive parties. Yet her success on screen was only part of the story. In 1968, she married director Roman Polanski, fresh off the international acclaim of Rosemary's Baby. Their union was celebrated as a golden match, two rising stars embodying the glamour and creativity of a new Hollywood generation. The couple became icons of the swinging 60s, splitting their time between Los Angeles and London, surrounded by artists, musicians, and cultural revolutionaries. Behind the flashbulbs, Sharon dreamed of a quieter life. Friends remembered how she spoke often of having children, of wanting to retreat from the industry's pressures and simply build a family. But she also remained ambitious, eager to prove that she was more than the roles handed to her. She wanted complex characters, meaningful stories, the kind of career that could endure beyond fleeting beauty. Her career was poised for that very evolution. Projects were lined up, and producers were finally beginning to see her as a serious actress. She had moved past the endless auditions and humiliating small parts Hollywood now came to her. Sharon Tate, once dismissed as just another starlet, had transformed into a bona fide celebrity. But with the rise came shadows. The late 1962nd were not a carefree time in Hollywood. The summer of love had given way to darker currents, disillusionment, drug abuse, and the spread of countercultural cults. Beneath the glamour of Beverly Hills, a different Los Angeles was taking shape, one of aimless youth, radical ideas, and growing violence. It was into this world that Sharon, radiant and pregnant, unknowingly stepped. By the summer of 1969, she was preparing to give birth to her first child. She decorated the Cielo Drive home she shared with Polanski, filled it with friends, and envisioned the future she had long dreamed of, a balance of career and family, fame and intimacy. Hollywood saw in her a symbol of promise, the perfect mix of innocence and stardom. But fate, already circling, was about to turn that promise into a tragedy so shocking it would forever scar the dream factory. By the summer of 1969, Sharon Tate was living what seemed like the culmination of a dream. She was 26 years old, married to one of the most acclaimed directors of his generation, and carrying their first child. The mansion at 10,050 Cielo Drive, perched above Los Angeles, became a hub for artists, actors, and friends. Sharon's warmth made everyone feel welcome, and her excitement about motherhood gave the house an atmosphere of expectancy. Yet, just beneath the surface, Los Angeles was shifting into something darker. The late 1962nd were marked by upheaval. The counterculture that had begun with music, peace, and free love was splintering into drugs, disillusionment, and anger. Among the drifters and broken youth wandering California was Charles Manson, a failed musician with delusions of grandeur. Rejected by the music industry, Manson reinvented himself as a prophet of an impending race war. He gathered around him a group of young followers, mostly women, whom he manipulated with drugs, charisma, and fear. They became known as the Manson family. Manson's bitterness toward Hollywood ran deep. He had brushed against its edges, befriended Beach Boys drummer Dennis Wilson, even recorded a few songs, but true stardom eluded him. In his paranoid worldview, Hollywood's elite were symbols of the establishment he despised and targets for his violent revolution. By 1969, Manson's teachings grew apocalyptic. He preached of helter-skelter, a race war he claimed would engulf America, and he convinced his followers they would be his chosen survivors. To spark this chaos, he ordered them to commit acts of brutal violence against the very world he longed to join, but that had cast him aside. Sharon Tate, radiant and vulnerable, became an unknowing figure in this tragedy. Roman Polanski was in London working on a new project, leaving Sharon at Cielo Drive with close friends and house guests. On the night of the 8th of August, 1969, the serenity of her home was shattered. Members of the Manson family, Tex Watson, Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Linda Kasabian arrived under orders to kill. What unfolded was one of the most infamous massacres in modern history. The killers stormed the house, leaving chaos and terror in their wake. Sharon, 8 months pregnant, pleaded for the life of her unborn child. Her final moments, marked by desperation and helplessness, epitomized the senseless cruelty of the crime. When it was over, 5 people lay dead, their lives extinguished in a frenzy of violence. Words scrawled in blood on the walls announced to the world that this was no ordinary murder. It was a message, one written in horror. News of the killing spread like wildfire. Hollywood, accustomed to scandal, had never faced anything like this. If Sharon Tate, a woman beloved for her innocence and grace, could be slaughtered in her own home, then no star was safe. The murders shattered the illusion of Hollywood as a secure haven for its elite. The Dream Factory was now exposed as vulnerable, fragile, and terrifyingly mortal. For Sharon's family, the loss was unbearable. Doris Tate, her mother, would spend the rest of her life fighting for victims' rights, turning grief into activism. For Roman Polanski, the tragedy became a scar he never fully escaped. For Hollywood, the killings marked the end of an era, the bright optimism of the 1962nd giving way to paranoia, fear, and a darker vision of fame. And for Charles Manson, the crime achieved what he wanted most: notoriety. His name, and that of his family, became synonymous with evil, forever intertwined with the death of Sharon Tate. But the story did not end there. The trial that followed exposed not just the madness of Manson, but the fragile underbelly of an industry built on illusion. The night of the 8th of August, 1969, began like any other warm California evening. Sharon Tate, 8.5 months pregnant, was at home in the Cielo Drive mansion with her friends Jay Sebring, Wojciech Frykowski, and Abigail Folger. They ate dinner, talked late into the night, and tried to escape the loneliness Sharon felt with her husband away in London. No one could have imagined that within hours their laughter would be replaced by screams that echoed across the canyon. Shortly after midnight, a car carrying 4 members of Charles Manson's family stopped outside the gate. Tex Watson, Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Linda Kasabian slipped into the property under Manson's orders to destroy everyone inside. Armed with knives, a revolver, and an almost ritualistic devotion to their leader, they entered the home and unleashed chaos. The attack was savage. Jay Sebring, Sharon's close friend and former fiancé, was the first to be killed while trying to protect her. Wojciech Frykowski, though badly beaten and shot, fought desperately to escape but was overpowered. Abigail Folger ran into the yard, bloodied and terrified, only to be chased down. Inside the house, Sharon faced her killers. She begged them to spare her unborn child, offering herself in exchange. Her pleas were ignored. In a frenzy, the murderers ended her life, stabbing her repeatedly despite her cries for mercy. Sharon Tate was just 26 years old. By dawn, the mansion was a scene of unspeakable horror. The words "pig" were smeared in blood on the front door, a grotesque calling card of Manson's apocalyptic vision. When police arrived, hardened investigators were shaken to their core. Even in a city accustomed to crime, the brutality was beyond comprehension. News of the massacre broke the following morning, and Hollywood froze. Headlines blared across the world: actress Sharon Tate slain in ritual murder. Fans wept, journalists swarmed the gates of Cielo Drive, and speculation ran wild. Some whispered of satanic cults, others of drug-fueled orgies gone wrong. The randomness of the crime only deepened the terror. If Sharon Tate could be killed, then so could anyone. The following night, the Manson family struck again, murdering supermarket executive Leno LaBianca and his wife Rosemary in their Los Angeles home. By then, panic had consumed the city. Celebrities hired private security, bought guard dogs, and fortified their homes. Once a symbol of freedom and glamour, Los Angeles became a city living in fear. The arrest and trial of Charles Manson and his followers revealed a world of madness. In the courtroom, Manson carved a swastika into his forehead. His followers sang hymns of devotion, and testimonies painted him as a manipulative cult leader who turned lost youth into killers. The murders, it became clear, were not random but the product of Manson's twisted quest for fame and power. For Sharon's family, the trial was a wound reopened daily. Doris Tate sat through testimony, detailing her daughter's final moments, determined to see justice served. When the guilty verdicts came, Manson and several of his followers were sentenced to death, later commuted to life imprisonment. Justice had been done, but no verdict could undo the loss. In the aftermath, Sharon Tate's name became immortal, but not in the way she or her loved ones would have chosen. She was remembered less for her rising career and more as a symbol of innocence destroyed by senseless evil. Her death marked the end of Hollywood's golden illusion. After 1969, no one believed the industry was untouchable anymore. And yet, from the ashes of tragedy, Sharon's story continued to shape culture. Films, books, and countless documentaries returned to that night, each trying to make sense of the horror. But the truth was stark. Sharon Tate had been a bright star, extinguished before she could shine fully. Her promise lived on only in the memory of those who loved her and the haunting reminder of what was lost. But beyond the tragedy, Sharon's legacy did not fade, it transformed, becoming both a warning and a call to remember her not as a victim, but as a woman whose life carried meaning beyond its violent end.